Your speaker is Dr. Roy Hayden.
There are several things that a person should look for in this slide presentation. Note the 4 natural sections of Palestine, the distinctive features and differences in each of the 4 sections, and the effects of the geography and climate of the Holy Land upon the people and events of Bible times. When God first revealed himself to man, and later in the fullness of time sent his Son, Jesus Christ, into the world, he chose the tiny strip of land called Palestine in which to do it. Here we have a general view of that land. This is a typical scene. Notice the rocky area in the right foreground, the terraced fields in the middle, and the hills in the distance. Palestine is a part of the area known to all students of the Bible and ancient history as the Fertile Crescent, a huge arc of inhabited and cultivated land between the sea, the desert, and the mountains. The heartland of the Near East is the area between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, here designated by Babylonia and Assyria, but generally called Mesopotamia. To the north and east of this area are the Zagros Mountains. To the south and west is the arid Arabian Desert. The Mediterranean Sea serves as a western boundary, both for the land of Palestine and the Fertile Crescent, since the land of Palestine is the southwestern leg of the Fertile Crescent. Palestine is a natural land bridge over which pass the major trade routes of the Old World, from the north, the south, the east, and west. Thus Palestine has long been the crossroads of Europe, Asia, and Africa. Palestine is made up of 4 natural sections: the coastal plains, shown in orange, the central mountains, in red, the Jordan Valley, in green, and the Transjordan Plateau, fringed by hills and desert, in yellow. The plains of the coastland are divided by hills into 3 groups: the plain of Asher to the north, Esdraelon and Jezreel in the middle, and Philistia to the south. This coastal plain section is bounded on the west by the long, narrow coast of the Mediterranean. But because of the scarcity of harbors along the coast, the people of Palestine could not compete with the seafaring commerce of the Phoenicians to the north. There are no good natural harbors, even in Palestine today. So these people turned naturally to agriculture. And the section that gets the most rainfall and is the most fertile is the coastal plains. Much of this area, however, was controlled by people other than the Israelites. During most of their history, the early history, this area was controlled by the Philistines. The second natural geographic section of Palestine is the Central Mountains, or the Western Highlands. And it is this area that concerns us more in our discussion of the biblical events. For here was the real heartland of the Israelite people. These actually begin with the Lebanon Mountains in the north, seen here in this aerial view. Several of its summits reach nearly 10,000 feet and are always white with snow. The name Lebanon is derived from a Semitic word that means to be white. In Bible times, the slopes of these mountains were covered with majestic cedar trees, and the cedars of Lebanon were world famous. We know that Sargon I, in 2300 BC, got wood, materials from this area. In the Gilgamesh epic, Gilgamesh, with his friend Enkidu, comes to this area to fight the monster. Wenamon, about the year 1200, is sent to this area to gain wood to build the bark of Amun-Re in Egypt, and Solomon secured the building material for the temple from this same area. But after 40 centuries, this grove of trees at the 6,000-foot level is one of the very few that are left. The mountains in this area were formed by giant geologic folds and upheavals. The strata in this view illustrates well how the earth has been folded. Between the Lebanon and anti-Lebanon mountains, a great earthquake formed the beautiful Bekaa Valley. Today, the Bekaa Valley is famous for the ruins of Baalbek, and this vast area is strewn with the ruins of what were once lavish temples that demonstrate the architectural genius of Greek and Roman builders. There are also traces of Egyptian and Phoenician influences. The anti-Lebanon mountains continue southward and culminate with Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon was sacred to the people of Old Testament times, and its name means forbidden place. Its principal peak is divided into 3 summits, the highest of which is over 9,000 feet. It is covered with snow much of the year. Some say that in the foothills of Mount Hermon is the site of Christ's transfiguration. The central mountain section continues southward to the hills of Galilee. Note the ruggedness of the terrain. The hills are not especially high, ranging from about 3,000 to 1,000 feet above sea level. The hills are cut in numerous places by fertile valleys that hold the moisture of winter rains and are rich with fields of grain. Here the moisture-laden winds from the Mediterranean bring the rains that make the hillside blossom with springtime flowers. Separating Galilee from Samaria to the south is the east-west rift, commonly called the Valley of Esdraelon or Jezreel. It is an immensely fertile area and is excellent for growing grain and other crops. This plain was where Deborah defeated the Canaanites, Gideon fought the Midianites, and Saul battled the Philistines in the campaign that cost him his life and that of his sons on Mount Gilboa. Then the mountains extend down into Samaria, where they become rolling hills. In only a few places do they reach a height of more than 2,000 feet. Again, note the rocky terrain. In the hills of Samaria is the town of Shechem, near where Jacob's well is located and where Joseph is buried. It was near here that Jesus talked with a Samaritan woman. Abraham stopped at Shechem briefly when he first entered the land of Canaan. Mount Ebal lies to the north of Shechem, and Mount Gerizim to the south. In the southernmost part of the central mountain section are the hills of Judea. About half of Judea is desert, and the soil of the other half is rather patchy. The nature of the terrain is perhaps one of the greatest surprises that the visitor to Palestine experiences, even though he is partially prepared by reading descriptions and even seeing pictures. Here on a plateau on the edge of the Kidron Valley sits Jerusalem, the holy city. The conspicuous round dome belongs to the beautiful Dome of the Rock, an Arab mosque built in the 7th century. We are looking at the city from the east. The Mount of Olives is just across the Kidron Valley from the city walls to the east and is part of a ridge that separates Jerusalem from the wilderness of Judea. Desolate, barren, and chalky, This wilderness is the traditional site of the temptation of Jesus. Another shot of the wilderness area. Note that very little vegetation grows here. Here too, in this desert wilderness, preached John the Baptist, the voice of one crying in the wilderness. Farther south, the central mountain section reaches its height around Hebron, near the tomb of Abraham, and then flattens out into the plateau known as the Negev, which runs down into the Sinai Peninsula. The third geographical section into which Palestine is naturally divided is the Jordan Valley. In this valley, a tremendous earthquake fault or depression in the surface of the earth cuts completely through Palestine from north to south. It is farther below sea level than any other valley in the world. Along the floor of this great valley flows the waters of the Jordan River. The Jordan begins at the foot of Mount Hermon. Here, the cold waters from the rushing mountain streams and melting snow from the peak of Mount Hermon join the waters of several small rivers and streams to form the Jordan River. The river is not large at this point, and except in the flood season, it may be crossed at several points. It is always lush and green around the source of the Jordan, even in the hottest summer. From the foothills of Mount Hermon, the Jordan River winds its way down to the Hula Basin. A very extensive drainage system has made this former disease-ridden swamp into a fertile farmland. Moving southward about 17 miles, the Jordan River flows into the beautiful Sea of Galilee. Except for the northern end, where the river flows in, and the southern end, where the Jordan leaves the lake, the sea is completely surrounded by mountains. And this helps to explain why you get the sudden storms on the Sea of Galilee. The Sea of Galilee, a freshwater lake about 13 miles long and 8 miles wide, lies 680 feet below sea level. In Jesus' day, it was surrounded with villages and towns. At the south end of the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River leaves the lake to continue its journey southward. Twisting and turning like a serpent, the Jordan makes its way down the valley through land that becomes less and less fertile. 5 miles west of the Jordan, and about 4 miles from the north end of the Dead Sea, was the site of the Jericho of Jesus' day. Nothing remains now except some palm trees and a small village. This is the old Jericho road to Jerusalem, built by the Romans out of solid stone. It was immortalized by Jesus in his story of the Good Samaritan. Note the desolate area of the Judean wilderness through which one must pass. The Jordan flows past Jericho and makes its way to the Dead Sea. Here the land is mostly desert, with only a few patches of green near occasional springs. When the swift waters of the Jordan reach the Dead Sea, they have come to the end of their journey, for the Dead Sea has no outlet. All of the water which flows into the sea from the Jordan and other tributaries evaporates as quickly as it runs in. The Dead Sea is 46 miles long and about 9 miles wide. It is 1,292 feet below sea level and more than 1,300 feet deep in spots, making it the lowest body of water on the Earth's surface. The tremendous heat and rapid evaporation make the water of the Dead Sea 6 times saltier than the ocean. The great rift of the Jordan Valley extends south from the Dead Sea into the Arabah wilderness and on to the Persian Gulf. The fourth geographical section of Palestine is a Transjordan area, the great Arabian tableland, rising out of the Jordan Valley and stretching out into the deserts of the east. In the north of the Transjordan area are these hills of Gilead. In Bible times, the land was covered with forests, which were almost as famous as those of Lebanon. We have such phrases as the balm of Gilead, which refers to a sweet-smelling resin or gum. Gilead is divided into two parts by the steep-sided valley of the Jabbok River, which flows into the Jordan. When Jacob was returning to the land of Canaan to see his brother Esau, it was by the Jabbok River that a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. Farther south, the hills level out into vast plateaus where wheat and barley are grown almost exclusively. This section is the breadbasket of Palestine and is near Ammon, the chief city of the Ammonites in Bible times. One of the striking geographical features of this plateau area is the gorge through which flows the river Arnon on its way to the Dead Sea. The Arnon enters the Dead Sea from the east, about midway between the northern and southern ends. To the east and to the south of the Transjordan Plateau lies the desert. Its sands have been crossed by caravans through the centuries. This is the land that God chose long ago in which to reveal His redemptive love for mankind.
This has been a video presentation of Bible 2114, Unit number 5, entitled The World of the Bible, Geography. This is the end of the program.